Phil Rees, a South Australian by birth. Please come forward, Phil. Came to Western Australia many years ago and became involved in aviation here. First of all on Jandakot Airport, moved to Perth Airport, where he flew medium and heavy aircraft. He was the Swan Brewery pilot, their jet pilot, some years ago. He moved to the Eastern States and moved up the ladder of aviation, but never really lost touch with the general aviation scene. He is the president of AOPA, the Aircraft and Pilots Owners Association, and he's about to tell us all about that today. He has made, as Brian mentioned, a special trip from Sydney to tell us all about AOPA. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Brian, and I must say that I'm honoured to be here. A little humble when I hear so much about the exploits, abilities of all the people present. I think in some ways I do qualify as an old flyer. I've reached that age in life where I can say that with some degree of confidence. I'd like to just give you a little bit of information on myself, first of all. As Brian said, I learned to fly in South Australia. I came across to Western Australia as a result of watching a feature film. I think it was called New Frontiers, and I was very excited and by all of these great flying shots of people flying up gorges and fantastic things that were happening in the Western Australian mining area. And so over I came, and I must say that I stayed for 12 years. And when I arrived, I met Cliffy Brown, who initially employed me with the Beechcraft division of Hawkeye Haviland. From there I was put into the role of contract pilot for Swan Brewery, and eventually became their chief pilot. When I first arrived in Western Australia, I was one of these wise men from the east, so after about 3 years I got sick and tired of being told I was one of these wise men. And I said, well, I've been here 3 years now, I've taken out naturalisation papers. And I think I became one of the most parochial Western Australians around, even though I was an import. But like a lot of things in life, and we aren't always masters of our own fate, the imminent possibility of takeover of Swan Brewery by Robert Holmes Court brought Alan Bond into the scene as their white knight. Of course, Swan decided that they needed to get rid of the flight department, even though it was doing quite a good job for them. And of course, they closed that down, and I moved across to the East Coast. It's interesting, of course, that Lloyd Zampatti, the chief executive of Swan Brewery, was fired by Alan Bond. He became the CEO of Castlemaine Tuies. Alan Bond took that over and fired him again, so I don't know. I think the fates were against him. This is a photograph taken of the Boeing 727 that I was flying for the Westfield Group. I spent 16 years flying for them. I started their flight operations off with Learjets. We moved through Hawker 700 to Challenger, and then the Boeing 727, which we had full glass cockpit and everything else. We had re-engined it with the Rolls-Royce Tay engines and put winglets on it. So it was quite an interesting aircraft, and we were able to cross the Pacific one stop via Tahiti and come back that way. Not every time, of course. Occasionally the winds would be against us, but it was a great aeroplane. This is taken at Queenstown with the Lear, and that was one of the interesting flights in and out of there. The Challenger, which we operated, and that was our first aircraft we started going around the world in. And no, I never got to fly this one, much as I would have liked to have. And another shot of the Boeing and the crew, and of course myself, obviously. And these days I now fly a far more sophisticated aircraft, my twin Comanche. Single pilot, which is a lot harder. My lovely daughter, and of course my little tractor towing it out of the hangar. But I really didn't come here to talk about myself. I come here to talk about AOPA and what AOPA is doing, and trying to let you know that we are all doing our very best to try and keep general aviation alive and well. And so our role is to serve general aviation. That's the way we see it. And this is our mission statement. It's the right to fly without unnecessary restrictions and costs. It doesn't mean to say we want to fly with no rules or regulations, but we don't want those rules and regulations to totally destroy general aviation. And the way things have gone over the last few years, if we allow them to continue, that can happen. We're trying to work as closely as possible with the regulators. We're trying to get people to recognise the value of general aviation. General aviation is the grassroots of aviation. Without a good, sound general aviation, the rest of aviation cannot grow and prosper, and that's the airlines. There are certain benefits of membership, and obviously I'm here to tell you how great AOPA is and what the great benefits are. Australian Pilot comes out every other month, and it's packed with top aviation stories. We have some good writers. We have a number of people that are contributing. And Australian Pilot Extra, which is a members-only magazine, and that comes out every other month. And while Australian Pilot is sold at the newsagents, Australian Pilot Extra is only supplied to the membership. By being a member of AOPA, you're supporting AOPA's representative work. We respond to the regulators, to their rule making. We liaise with the members of CASA, Air Services and other agencies and committees, and we participate on just about every aviation committee or panel that's of any relevance to general aviation. There's media liaison, which we're involved with. We keep it tightly controlled, or at least we try to, but I think that through our magazines we're a credible source of information to general aviation. There are other benefits, of course, discounts on hotels, rental cars, restaurants, all those sorts of things. These are some illustrations of our magazines, and I've got with anyone who would be interested in having a look at what at liberty to help themselves. Recent articles, quite diverse, rather eclectic group of articles, and changes that are happening in Class D airspace, which has affected a lot of us operating out of secondary airports. In articles on law, of course, the article which I wrote on the problem I had when I had a stent installed, and I had to stop flying for 6 months until I could re-qualify. I have now, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to make the magazines as interesting and as related to the activities of the general aviation public as possible, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. Our directors, there's myself, I'm president, Andrew Anderson, a very, very talented gentleman, and who's on our ASTRA committee and working on the performance-based navigation program. He's vice chair of that, backs me up. Spencer Ferrier, who's our secretary and also our legal counsel. Cole Rogers, past president, now treasurer, does a very good job. Jeff Muller. Jeff is also involved with Warbirds, flies an L39, and he looks after a lot of our magazine side of things. Peter Holstein. Peter is a new director which we brought on board. I felt that we needed to have representation for the helicopter side of aviation, a very important part of aviation. And when the Helicopter Association of Australia fell over, for want of a better word, there was a void, and I thought that we could step in and try and assist them. And so Peter Holstein's been brought on board. He runs a very successful flying operation in Camden Airport, Aero Wasp. I believe he also has a branch at Toowoomba and the country. Alan Bligh. Alan, many of you will know, for many, many years Alan is Mr. Piper. He sold Piper aircraft throughout Australia. Alan does quite a bit for us on the Air Services Pricing Committee. And then, of course, Neil Rear. Neil is our new director. I was very concerned that Western Australia state very dear to my heart, and I think probably one of the most important aviation states, didn't have an AOPA representative. And we've looked around for quite a while to find the right person, and Neil fits that bill perfectly, and Neil very graciously agreed to come on board. Peter Rato, who's also Secretary of the Many Pilots Association, and Dr. Tony van der Spek in Victoria. Tony is a DAME, and I thought with medical issues coming up that we needed somebody who could answer those questions for our members. All the directors, by the way, don't receive any remuneration. In fact, because like most organisations, we've had our financial struggles, and we're now, I must say, coming up into the black, and things are starting to improve because of the steps we took to try and reduce overheads and costs. So I had to rule that directors pay their own way. So we pay our own expenses and we don't claim anything back. So it's all voluntary, and all of the people involved, all of the directors, are enthusiasts, and they're doing it because they love aviation. They want to put something back into it. And as I said, I've already just covered that, no reward, no compensation. All the directors have quite a lot of relevant aviation experience, and I'm happy to say that now we're getting more people with a bit of business background as well, because I think we need both the aviation background and we need the business background if we're going to be a credible organisation and get results. All of our directors have to sign a code of conduct, and we're bound by that code. Recent achievements, we've managed to achieve quite a few things actually. You'll recall the Cessna SID that came out, which was quite a big problem. We managed to get that resolved. The fuel injection servo plug problem, they grounded 3,000 aeroplanes. We managed to get that rescinded. Transponder testing, for a while there it looked like everybody owned a transponder was going to have to pay huge amounts of money for testing. We've got them down to just those particular transponders that were causing a problem requiring testing. And we've had them withdraw the classification of operations, which was going to be a real problem. It would require everyone who was carrying a passenger to virtually have to have that passenger sign a hold harmless agreement to get on board the aeroplane, or you had to have an air operator's certificate. And recently we helped the SAAA resolve a problem where their appointment of authorised persons was withdrawn arbitrarily by CASA, and that looked like having the potential to ground a lot of the fleet. We got that resolved. Aviation medical standards, well of course I mentioned that with Tony van der Spek, a lot of representations happening there. We handle licensing, consultative committees, airspace planning, direct contact with CASA's CEO. I have a very good relationship with John McCormick. He's a difficult man to deal with, but we have a good relationship, and I'm on the safety committee. We meet 3 times a year. In fact, I'm going to the next meeting in 17th of March, where we have the opportunity to put the industry's views forward and hopefully reduce some of the burdens of the regulators will be placed on us. And there are many more things that we get involved in. I just want to touch briefly on our relationship with Air Services. I mentioned Alan is working on pricing proposals, and we've got them to recognise that the cost of recovering prices from GA is more than the actual money earned. So we're working to have that reduced. Air Services provide 4 scholarships every year for AOPA, which enable us to get young people into the industry and get them started, and that's very good. And I think I mentioned before that Andrew Anderson's been working on the ASTRA committee, and whether we like it or not, ADSB is going to be part of the ongoing scene, and as a replacement for radar throughout the region. And we feel it's better that we're part of the process rather than having something foisted on us that's suitable for airlines only and wouldn't work for GA. And we've managed to gain quite a few concessions on that. There's been a lot of changes in aviation over the years, and as we all know, we move forward and technology improves, and so we have to embrace a lot of that technology, and we're trying to do it without creating too many problems for general aviation. One of the biggest battles we face in aviation, of course, is loss of airports, and that's been an ongoing problem. And you'll know here at Janticott Airport, where it's been privatised, and Bankstown Airport, in Sydney Basin in particular, we had 3 GA airports. They were sold to one operator. That's Bankstown, Camden and Holstein Park. Holstein Park was closed, and I had a hangar there, so which was very close to my heart. And as a result of that, now we only have 2 airports in the Sydney Basin to handle a population of over 4.5 million people. And so it's an ongoing problem for us. We recently won a battle over Kempsey Airport. We had a big fly-in there, and we managed to get Kempsey saved. There are still a number of other airports that's under threat. The land developers see these as a gold mine for them, but unfortunately it's irreparable damage to aviation. Once we lose an airport, you'll never get it back. So we're working very hard to try and save those airports. It was a very poor decision on the part of the previous government by selling the airports, handing over a lot of the airports to councils who really don't have the wherewithal or the financial ability to run them properly. But unfortunately that has happened, and there's not much we can do about it. We can only move forward and hopefully try and rectify the situation as best we can. Recently, just last year, we held a Revitalization Summer, and my concern has always been that the industry hasn't been able to voice what it believes is needed to improve general aviation. So we called a summit where we asked for all the leading organisations, people such as AMROBA, SAAA, Warbirds, Ag Aircraft, so on and so forth. They overran it. We hosted it. We ran it as a series of workshops over 2 days. And the sole premise for the operation was that it had to be run as a constructive workshop. It wasn't there to criticise the government. It wasn't there to find fault with the regulator, but we would, as industry people, to identify the problems and come up with solutions. The plan is that from those workshops we have now got a number of ideas which we put into a white paper or a roadmap, and I'm hoping by the end of February that we can have that sent out to every politician in the country. It's our belief that we need to publicise this. There's not enough recognition of what general aviation does for the country. Most people see general aviation as a bunch of people playing with their toys, and they don't realise that without general aviation a lot of our transportation country setups would not exist. Medical evacuations, firefighting, police air wing, they're all part of a very, very important industry. So we're planning to have this prepared and as I said, distributed by the end of February. And when I get back from this trip, we have a meeting scheduled to finalise it. And in preparing this white paper and giving it to the government, all we can hope is the government will follow through with it and take some ideas from it. We can't guarantee that will happen, but at least we will have tried. Our membership at the moment is just steady at about 3,000 people. And those members, there's a pretty wide base of membership. There's student pilots, there's airline transfer pilots, commercial instructors, private as well as RAOs. But there are 15,000 current Class 2 medicals And with all those people out there, I think, well, why aren't they part of AOPA? Because any organisation, the strength of an organisation is in their numbers. And when we're talking to politicians, if we had, say, 12,000 members, we'd have a lot stronger voice than with 3,000. We're trying to get that membership base up. We've had some very tough decisions over the last 2 years. Since I took over as president, our finances were in a pretty bad state, and we had to make some significant staffing cuts and changes. And I'm happy to say that we've now turned the organisation around. And curtailing the expenses, we're finally starting to come up into the black, and which is very important. Just recently I went to the United States to attend the International AOPA conference, and the big AOPA conference in Long Beach, California, and where I met with presidents of other organisations throughout the world. And though we were one of the founding members of International AOPA, some years back we dropped that membership. I've now re-affiliated our organisation with them. It was interesting doing that trip because my wife was very upset that I was going to spend all this money travelling to the United States to attend a conference. So I thought very quickly, how do I overcome this? So I said, well, why don't you come with me and you can do some recreational shopping in Los Angeles. And of course, we can fly across to New York and you can do some more shopping there. Well, I can tell you it was one of the most expensive trips I've ever done. But I did buy some toys for myself. And I haven't talked too much with her about that.
I would.
Yeah, Neil apparently is going to let her know. Thank you, Neil. Well, where are we now? Well, Col Rogers, the immediate past president, commenced engagement with other organisations. And I've tried to build on what Col started. One of the things that in the past with AOPA, we had all these big egos. We had people that were there, their own honour and glory, but I don't know what else they were doing. We had the people that were prepared to fight a court case at the drop of a hat, at huge expense. And so, of course, our organisation, which was very strong financially, ended up almost at the verge of bankruptcy. So the big egos are gone. I've tried to recruit directors who will contribute, work as a team, and who are there for the good of aviation. And one of the things we're obviously doing is trying to seek more members, because the strength of our organisation depends on our membership. One of the things that I was a bit shocked when I first took the role on was at how poor our website was. It was a shocking website. So if we want to bring young people in, and we need younger people, then we've got to make our organisation more relevant. And a good website was very important. We've had that totally redesigned, and I believe it's now almost to the point where it's where we want it to be. And if you go onto that website, you'll see all the latest magazine articles and everything else, and information. We're also trying to use it as a means to tell our members what's happening and give them a heads up. We support all the flying schools and the aero clubs as much as possible. We try to do our very best to try, through our contacts, to assist them with our representative efforts. I believe in the past the total negativity that has been so much part of aviation was a total failure. I think we've got to engage with the regulators. By all means, we will fight them over an issue if it warrants it, but our first effort is to try and negotiate and to arrive at a compromise that suits everybody. If you adopt a confrontational approach all the time, well, the airlines are going to win out, because their representation is stronger, and they win by default. So by attending meetings and negotiating and working with the regulators, we believe we are achieving a lot more than what we did in the past with our previous confrontational attitude. This is a little bit of a commercial here, sorry about that. Anyone who wishes to join AOPA, I'm sure most of you people are probably already members anyway, but you can join through our website or through direct by contacting us. And I think it's important that when we think about some of the issues, that we look at the United States, for example. GA in Australia is falling behind. Recent governments have had really no interest, an apathetic approach to GA. And we need an industry commitment. And I remember reading the white paper, and I put in an 18-page submission to that white paper that the Minister Albanese released, and I was bitterly disappointed. It was full of motherhood statements and platitudes and how much GA is valued, but nothing of any substance, which is why we're preparing our own. I won't bore you with anything more on that side of it, but just a little bit on AOPA, and I think in conclusion, I'd like everyone to realise that AOPA is not the organisation that a lot of people saw back about 10 years ago. I think now we've turned the corner. We're starting to make some progress. We've got a good team of directors on board, and we'll have quite a nice stand at the Avalon Air Show, so anybody that's over there is very welcome to come along and see us. And I'm sure that Neil, in his efforts here in Western Australia, will be open to any suggestions or ideas that are put forward. In conclusion, I think that I'd like to say that it's been a pleasure to come over, and I've really enjoyed it, having spent so many years in Western Australia. It's nice to come back and to catch up with some familiar faces and to be here. And we're hoping that we can spend a lot more time coming to Western Australia. So thank you very much for putting up with me, and thank you for inviting me over.